want to thank everybody for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about planning with irrevocable trust. Now, I think irrevocable trust can be a great planning tool for our clients if they're used properly. If they're not used properly, they can be an incredible problem for our clients as well. However, I don't think a lot of planners understand how or why they would recommend using an irrevocable trust. I think the word irrevocable scares a lot of people away, and it scares them from using this strategy. It scares them from understanding how this strategy can even help their clients. So if we take a step back and start looking at the irrevocable trust and what it can do for us, I think you'll find that it's got a lot of opportunities for our clients. When I look at planning with irrevocable trusts, I think the first step with it, or the first part of this, we need to understand why would we would even use this kind of a planning tool. I think this first thing is the estate taxes. Now with estate tax, of course, if we're using an irrevocable trust and we're moving assets out of the estate, that's a great thing because we move not only the asset out of the estate, but we remove that future appreciation. Now, today's estate tax exemption is $13.61 million. It's a large number, and for a lot of people, this doesn't apply to them anymore. But if you think about the estate tax exemption, we know in 2026, whatever it is, it's going to divide in two. It's going to cut in half. So for spouses, you're going to lose half of that exemption. So the question is, do you move assets out now? Do you wait and do it later? The estate tax exemption is a moving target, and we just have to be able to plan for it. But estate taxes is only one of the issues. You start looking at the other reasons why we would use an irrevocable trust. Well, the next thing is asset protection. If we're moving those assets out of the estate, those assets are going to be protected from the creditors. Whoever, if mom and dad are transferring them out into that irrevocable trust, those assets are no longer in mom and dad's estate. They're again not subject to mom and dad's creditors. We can also create it so it's protected from the beneficiary's creditors. So whoever's the beneficiary of this trust, as long as that asset is held in trust with a spendthrift provision, those assets are protected from the beneficiary's creditors. That can be a great tool to help protect that from us, the creditors of a spouse, kids, grandkids, whoever those heirs are going to be. Finally, looking at an irrevocable trust is, do you want to control your legacy? How do you want your money and your assets used by your heirs? Do you want to encourage, or discourage behavior? What do you want your legacy to look like? And using an irrevocable trust, we can use this trust for generations if we want to be able to help you make sure that your legacy is the way you want it to be. So you start looking at these non-tax reasons, and a lot of times with many of our clients, it's just not one why. There's multiple whys of how we would set this up and why we would set it up this way. When you look at planning is a balancing act, especially when we're looking at irrevocable trust. We're looking at what assets should we transfer? What assets do we want to give up control? How much to put into the trust? There again, if it's an estate tax, issue, then we're trying to remove enough to get our estate tax down to zero or at least manageable, and then cover the rest with life insurance. But there again, do we want to move more assets out for asset protection and those other issues? And we have to look at that. One of the things that comes up is, well, if I move assets out of my estate, at my death, my assets don't get a step up in basis if they're held by the trust. That's correct. And that's why I say it's a balancing act of what is most important. What are we trying to eliminate the estate tax? Are we trying to eliminate capital gains tax? Do we even know what we're trying to balance here? And so looking at that as from an income tax perspective and estate tax perspective just gives us the ability to ask the why. The next thing is, what about lifetime needs? If I'm moving assets away from my estate, am I going to run out of money? And I work with a lot of high net worth clients, a lot of high income clients. they still have the same concerns. You know, do I have enough money to take care of myself or my family for the rest of my life? All of these are good issues to discuss. And if we're talking to our clients about it and being very open about it, we're going to get to the right answer of what is this strategy even something we want to consider, or is it something that we should move on and try a different strategy? When I look at irrevocable trust, one of the things with irrevocable trust is they're more flexible than I think a lot of people understand. Especially now we're starting to look at, well, what if I need access? What if my family needs access during life? When I look at a lot of irrevocable trust planning, the trust is almost put in place with very little discussion on what are we trying to accomplish. And so if you start looking at that is, yeah, if our goal is to get it out of the estate, whether it's for estate tax, whether it's to protect it from my creditors, you know, the grantor's creditors in that case, well, we've accomplished that. Check the box. It is out of the estate, and we've satisfied the estate tax planning. We may have satisfied some of our asset protection planning. But I want you to think about, you know, expanding your knowledge of the irrevocable trust here, and think about this. Let's put a spigot on that trust that has a lock on it. We can take that lock off if we want. We can open that spigot up a little bit, a lot, whatever makes sense. We can start creating lifetime access to the assets in the trust. And when I talk about lifetime access, lifetime during the grantor's lifetime. So let me put this into a little bit better terms. Let's say that we have dad setting up this trust. And dad sets this trust up for either spouse or kids. And this trust during dad's lifetime, we can have that spigot opened up to provide benefits to in this case the wife, and to the kids, grandkids, whoever the other beneficiaries of this trust are. But we can allow that spigot to be open so that we can take out income, we can take out principal. If we have life insurance in there, we can take access to cash value. Never ever for the grantor of the trust, but for the beneficiaries of the trust. So if you start thinking about that, and we start answering the question, what about lifetime needs? Well, having this trust, planning a little bit more discussed, a little bit more investigated, and adding that spigot might be the way to get assets out to people during the lifetime, and we don't run into those problems. Finally, one of the big issues on setting up an irrevocable trust is making sure we get the assets transferred into the trust and transferred in the right way. Because it's an irrevocable trust, we've got to deal with the gift tax. So we can use our annual gift tax exclusion, or we can use our lifetime exclusion. Either one of those work. If we're using annual gift tax exclusion, we've got to discuss crummy notices, which we'll talk about in another discussion. We can use the lifetime exemption, but we can also do loans. We can do a loan from the family. We can do loans from one of the family's companies, or we can do a loan from a captive insurance company. All of those would work. And of course, we can, use loans, premium finance, borrowing money from the bank, those types of issues. We can also get into other types of estate planning tools like sell to a defective trust, GRATs, other tools that help us leverage the lifetime exemption and annual exclusion. All of these need to be explored, because there again, we're moving assets out of the estate. We have to deal with the transfer as either a sale or a loan, or those assets potentially can be drugged back into the estate for estate tax purposes. They could be drugged back in for asset protection issues. Basically, we want to make sure that we set up the trust correctly, that we transfer the assets in correctly, but we take the time to make sure it's meeting our clients' goals. I appreciate everybody getting on. If you ever have questions on this, feel free to reach out. And if not, we'll talk again next week. Thank you.